Welcome, Jess Shanahan, racing mentor. Thank you very much for coming on the show and getting involved. But yeah, how are you?
I'm doing really well, thank you, and thank you so much for having me.
No worries. Now, I'm sure you'd agree that it's good now that racing's getting back started and things are getting busier.
Yeah, it's incredible. I went to my first race in, I think, what was about 18 months, not so long ago, and it was a weird experience because I felt like I was almost out of practice because I hadn't been to a racetrack in so long. So it's so nice to feel like stuff is finally getting back to normal.
Now, this is a question I often ask my guests, but when did you first become interested in motorsport?
I think I came quite late to the game compared to some people, so it's not like I watched it a lot as a kid. I had like a vague interest when I was in like high school, but I think I really got into it around maybe 2007 when I started watching Formula One. And it obviously very quickly grew into an obsession. And I think it was only like 3, 4 years before I was actually working in F1 as a journalist because, I'm that kind of person. If I want it, I'm going to go get it. So it's just escalated from there.
And would you say you have a favorite sort of type of motorsport to follow? I imagine F1's up there.
F1 was up there for a long, long time, but I think, the more that I've been involved in different kinds of motorsport, the more that I've kind of I still love Formula One. I haven't really watched it over the last couple of years just because I guess I got a bit bored with it. So now my focus is much more kind of on I love club motorsport because I just love the camaraderie between drivers. I love the atmosphere and the access that you get. But, I'm a big touring car fan and, I'm really getting into things like Formula E and Extreme E as well.
Absolutely. Well, would you say you always wanted to work in motorsport? Obviously, you did say you got into it quite late, but would you say that was always somewhere you always wanted to go?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily think that I would be in such an involved way as I am. And, when I first started watching Formula One, I really wanted to be a Formula One journalist. I wanted all that kind of glitz and glamour. And, I did that, but as I said, it just kind of continued from there. And then to kind of go and work with teams, run my own race team and be involved was amazing. But I never really necessarily had this dream to work in it in this way. It just kind of evolved organically, and I couldn't be happier with that.
Absolutely. Well, to anyone watching, how would you explain your job in motorsport? Because you're pretty busy.
Yes, I am. So, the simplest way to explain it is to talk about Racing Mentor, which is my motorsport brand, and through that, I coach racing drivers and teams and others within motorsport to get sponsorship and to learn kind of the business skills needed to succeed in this industry.
And how would you say you're able to help drivers? Because obviously it's a very difficult kind of thing to do with racing at the minute, especially with sponsors and stuff like that. It's a difficult job.
Yeah, it is tough. So, I come from a marketing and PR background. So, when I was running my Porsche race team, I kind of realized that I had all of these skills that made securing sponsorship for my team really easy. And I'd done it for a few drivers who were friends as well. I'd helped them out. But the more people that kind of came to me asking if I'd help them, give them advice, or, the people who were in the paddock going, how have you done this? How do you have such a professional setup in, the BRSCC Porsche Championship? And I realized that there is this huge lack of knowledge from drivers and actually most people within the industry because motorsport sponsorship once upon a time it was really cool, it was really easy, companies had lots of money to give, they wanted to support a driver. Things have changed now and there's a lot more kind of value based offering that drivers need to do to be able to get that same kind of money. So I basically teach business skills, so drivers are pitching themselves as influencers or as a business might, saying, hey, I can do this thing for you, and in exchange I want money, and that money happens to be being spent on going racing.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, when a company's sponsoring a driver, it's obviously it needs to work both ways and be
Exactly.
be good for both parties. But what would you say is the most important thing for a driver when they're trying to get a sponsor? What will companies look for when looking to sponsor a driver?
So I guess it's twofold. So I think the first is that companies will want to know that they're going to get value from it. They'll want to know that, they're going to get some kind of return on investment and hit their goals in some way through working with a driver. what that means varies from each company, but that might mean that, they'll be able to hold on to employees longer because they're getting good, hospitality perks at racetracks. It might be that they literally make more sales through social media promotion, whatever it might be, but the company needs to know that they're going to get something out of the partnership. So just like you say, it has to be a two-way thing. But I think companies are also looking for drivers that stand out. There are so many drivers that send pictures saying, hey, I'm the next big thing. I've won all of these races. Would you like to support me? You'll get, sticker on a race car and you'll reach this many million people on ITV4, whatever it might be. But those businesses have probably had tens of those proposals that look exactly the same. So one of the big things that I teach is thinking outside of the box, but also creating a brand for yourself that makes you stand out. So having something, whether that's an idea or something about your personality or a niche even outside of motorsport, something that's like that will make a business go, oh, this person's not like those tens of other racing drivers that have pitched to me today. This is the one I'm going to reply to.
Absolutely, exactly. I mean, it's a difficult thing, really, getting sponsors. I've spoken to lots of different drivers. Have said it's difficult. But if you could give one bit of advice to a driver, say they're watching, for example, about getting sponsors, what would it be? Because I know you've got plenty, but what's the most important thing?
So I think it would be creating a personalized pitch for every sponsor or every potential sponsor that you want to reach out to that really speaks to their goals. So that means finding out what they're trying to do with all of their other marketing activity and seeing how you can slot in and help them reach those goals quicker.
And as we've said, getting sponsors is difficult. But what would you say is the best thing about your job and working in motorsport in particular?
It's seeing drivers succeed. I mean, there's all the obvious perks. Like I get to play with race cars as my job. So that's great. I get to go to racetracks. I get to drive cars. I get to have hot laps. I get to hang out with cool people, travel, etc. But I think the biggest thing is seeing the drivers that I've worked with succeed in a way that they never would have believed they were able to do. And I'm there going, I know you can do this. I know you have this in you. And they're going, yeah, I don't know. But in working with them on a consistent basis, they start to build that confidence and they start to see that actually they have a ton of value to offer. And then seeing them succeed and go to, incredible race series, driving their dream cars is just such a wonderful thing.
I guess a good example of that is actually Toby Trice, who I recently spoke to on an interview, who had an amazing first weekend at Brands Hatch in the GT Cup. That must be really rewarding to see someone you've worked with to have such a great first weekend.
Yeah, it was incredible. And when I met Toby at Autosport a few years ago, he was like, I'm thinking about being a racing driver. I've read your book. What do I do next? And we've now worked closely together since that. He did my one of my 6-week course, went through that. He found a really strong niche. He partnered with a charity. I think he earned like a 5-figure sum within the first 5 weeks of the 6-week course. So I knew he had it in him. And, this whole time, he took a year off because of COVID and because nothing was really going and happening. He took a year off. But this whole time I've been saying to him, it's going to happen for you. So for him to get in a Ginetta to just put out 3 such stonking races was just incredible. And, to see how well he's doing for, Fertility Network UK, the charity that he works with, and for those sponsors, and see how happy they are with the service that he's providing them with. He should be the poster boy for sponsorship. He's doing such a great job, and it's so nice to kind of have played a part in that and see him continue to succeed.
Yeah, exactly. He's a great, driver, but also, as you've mentioned, keeps his fans happy, keeps his sponsors happy, which, he explained to me, which I find really interesting, to be honest, how different drivers, use social media and stuff like that. How important is stuff like social media, YouTube, blog, stuff like that?
So I think, there's a couple of schools of thought about this. Some drivers don't need to do it if they have a lot of business connections and, a lot of, sway in networking circles. Maybe they don't need it. But for most drivers, I'd say it's vital, because if you can build enough of a buzz around yourself, and actually Toby's a good example of this, if you can build enough of a buzz around what you're doing through your fans, through your sponsors, or through your own content, people are going to start to pay attention, which makes it so much easier for you to secure sponsorship, because all of those people who are liking your posts, commenting on LinkedIn, sending you little messages saying well done, they could be potential sponsors, and you don't have this stressful thing of trying to go out and find who is the decision maker at this company I've never spoken to before, which is a hard slog. So if you can create compelling content that shows you as a driver as the expert, but also as someone who can, make big waves and offer a lot to companies, those companies are just slowly going to start coming to you, and there's still work to be done to sell to them and pitch to them, but it really makes life so much easier. Plus, obviously, if you can build a big audience and say, hey, I've got 100,000 followers, that's something that you can sell to a big business as well. They would want to be like, I want to put a product in front of, this audience. Just like, you would if it was an influencer, a travel influencer or a fashion influencer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I find all this stuff really interesting because you don't hear too much about it on TV. And I won't ask you too many more questions, but one I did want to ask you. You mentioned it earlier. You've got a book out. How did that actually come about? Because that must be really cool.
It's really cool, and every so often I'm like, I wrote a book, which is like 8-year-old me's like dream was to write a book. So I started writing it as a much shorter guide to sponsorship. But the more I kind of got into it, the more I started putting all of my kind of thoughts and teachings down on paper. The more it kind of was like, this actually could be and should be a book. So I started working on it with that in mind, and it just kind of grew and grew, and I had a big launch event, and everything that proper authors do, which was really nice. But since then, the people that have read that book, so many of them have gone on to like completely change their careers just by thinking about sponsorship in a different way or having a handy reference. It's just kind of given drivers this confidence that they know what they're doing and that they can go and ask for money to go racing because they can provide something in return. So yeah, it's a monumental thing to have written a book. It's just really cool, like proper bucket list stuff. But again, just seeing how it's helping people is just so rewarding.
Absolutely, yeah, and as you said, it must be really rewarding, and another thing off the bucket list, as you've said, but that it must be sort of mind blowing. It's such a cool industry to work in. I think motorsport because I think initially a lot of people think you can be a racing driver and that's the only thing, but then you've got all these other things you can be, whether it's working in the garages or media, or like you've done helping people out. It must be really cool.
Yeah, really cool. And I've tried my hand a little bit of engineering and helping out as pit crew. I haven't done any driving, but I've been a team boss and a journalist, and it's so nice that once you're in motorsport you can try these different things. So it's been really nice to really test out different stuff and then find my place, which is helping people and teaching people.
So I was going to ask actually, because you started in journalism. How did you actually get into that to start with?
So I started off as a PR. So I was, I was working for an agency, and we had various different clients, and it was my job to get my clients into different, newspapers, magazines, TV, etc. So I was always kind of interfacing with journalists on that kind of client side. But my bosses at that agency, they were both journalists. So I learned a lot from them, and I started my own fashion blog. And I just started posting about fashion, talking about fashion, just every day. It was like proper, passion project kind of thing. Made me a little bit of money because it was in the, the early days of blogging where people would pay for like sponsored posts and stuff like that. So I did quite well from it. But that kind of gave me the background and the knowledge of writing to then start pitching to people, or starting to get my name out there as a fashion writer or as a local writer. And I did a lot of kind of copywriting and stuff like that as well. And I eventually went freelance and did more of like the content writing, copywriting for a while, with very occasional journalism stuff as well in magazines. But then I decided to kind of switch around the time that I kind of got into motorsport. And I started pitching pieces. I started saying, hey, I've got this, quite famous, well-read blog. I also started a car blog. And I just started to get access to these things, and I was writing about them. And it's kind of like, with what I was saying about racing drivers, I was putting enough of myself out there that I was creating a buzz that people started to come to me. And the biggest thing later on was that I made a niche for myself. So I started to specialize in electric cars and electric motorsport. And now that I'm known for that, I don't pitch, or I very, very rarely pitch. People mostly come to me for that kind of work because they know that I know it, because I'm talking about it on social media. I'm showing what I've written already, and it's given me kind of expert status. So it was very much a journey and kind of learning and figuring it all out. But I would say the big thing was like finding that niche and kind of, positioning myself as an expert who writes for magazines as well as writing for companies. And that kind of, yeah, it gave me this confidence that I don't need to pitch. I'm the expert. I'm a journalist. I'll write about these things and people come to me.
Absolutely. Well, you've got plenty of experience, achieved so much. But my final question really is, what would you say, are there any aims for the future?
So I'm working on a few really big things at the moment. So, one of the short-term goals is I'm working on a report about motorsport sustainability. So a really, really big kind of overview of what's happening in motorsport in terms of the environment, etc., but also where the sport that we love is going to go. Is it going to be fully electric? What's going to happen to internal combustion engine motorsport? All of that kind of thing. But also what's the impact on the environment? Communities, etc. So that's like my big project that I'm working on at the moment. As for Racing Mentor, we've got a big thing coming out later this year. We're working on a new course that's going to be huge, and I can't talk about it too much yet. But I think that's kind of the big thing. But you know what? I would love to run a race team again. Yeah. Even if it's just like for, one endurance race or like a 24-hour or something like that. I'd love to kind of, I just want people to call me boss again. Yeah. Like that's what I want. So I think that'd be really nice. And I think that's another kind of thing for Racing Mentor in the future. It'd be really nice to have like a swish, lock-up garage full of race cars that, I can teach people to do the sponsorship stuff, but there's also race cars as well. But I think that's, a little way in the future, and I've got probably too much on to be thinking about that just yet.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds good. We've obviously got the rest of the season to look forward to. And yeah, as I say, plenty more to look forward to. I wish you the best of luck in the future. And, as I said at the start, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been great to chat to you.
All right, Ben. Thank you very much.
Thank you.